If your ambulance is equipped with the Road Rescue UV700 display, then this portion of the DVD will train you on how to use every function of this amazing unit. The Road Rescue in-cab and patient module displays are ES-Key UV700 nodes utilizing a 7-inch touchscreen display and 14 multi-function buttons. Multiple menu screens are available on the display. You can use either the button on the sides of the screens or the on-screen buttons to activate or deactivate the desired function. This button is used to switch between the multiple screens. Some screens and functions are used to monitor system status, such as vehicle voltage, current draw, oxygen remaining, and more. Other screens are used to operate many of the ambulance's functions, such as warning lights and climate control. In addition to the UV700 display, there are 2 panels of SPS 1-touch physical switches. These panels of switches allow you to quickly choose many of the same functions without going through the menu system on the UV700. And they are very easy to use by a new person who has not yet been trained on the UV700. We will now show you all the front UV700 screens and describe their function. Then show each of the SPS 1-touch switches and their function. Next, we will take you to the patient module and go through the UV700 and the SPS switches there. The cab UV700. The switch on the bottom left brings up the home screen or system status indicator. This screen will show you which doors are open, whether the parking brake is on or not, the current voltage, and whether it's charging or discharging. The voltage block displays the vehicle battery. The color of the graphic bar display indicates the range of the detected voltage. Green means the voltage is being maintained within the nominal range. Yellow means the voltage is below 12 volts. Red means the voltage is greater than 14.8 volts. It will also show you the date and time and whether the patient module has been disconnected or not. As you can see, if the module is disconnected, it will have the international no symbol over it. The lower icon block shows the state of the parking brake and air ride dump. These icons are only visible when action has taken place. While on the home screen, pressing one of the side physical buttons will bring up an overlay, which will change the functionality of the side buttons. This will allow the user to access additional screens and change what is displayed in the amps area, such as amperage or oxygen PSI. This also allows the user to access the user config and diagnostic screens. The bottom button on the right will advance you through a sequence of switches screens. Here is the first or main switch screen. The number 1 switch on the left side is the master switch. It turns on the primary/secondary switch. The next switch is the primary/secondary switch. When primary is activated, it turns on all the warning lights on the ambulance. When the secondary part of the switch is activated, it turns off the cab and all white warning lights. And as you can see, the light turns yellow when secondary is activated. As we progress through the switches, we will only turn on the light of the switch under discussion, so you will not get confused on which switch we are discussing. Moving downward, the low power switch is used to dim the warning lights when needed, so drivers will not get distracted. It also has the added feature of reducing battery power consumption. The wig-wag switch is next and is used to flash the headlights. The preempt switch follows the wig-wag and is your traffic preempt emitter, switching traffic lights when you are on an emergency run. The key needs to be on, the master switch on, and the parking brake off for the wig-wag and preempt switches to function. Your ambulance is equipped with 2 cameras, backup and the patient module. The backup camera comes on automatically when the transmission is placed in reverse. On this screen, the user can view the backup camera video and deactivate or activate the backup alarm. The patient camera can be accessed by pressing the appropriate camera button on the left. The menu button switches you back to the switches screen. The 3 switches on the top right are used to control your scene lights. In addition, opening a particular door will also turn on the scene light for that side. First is the left scene lights. Next is the right scene lights, and the third switch controls the rear scene lights. The 4th button down is used to switch between activating either the OEM horn or the siren when the horn on the steering wheel is pushed.
The green button is used to turn the patient module functions on or off.
You have to press and hold this switch for 5 seconds to disconnect the module. Once it turns off, it will basically turn everything off in the patient module. The last button on the right is the day or night button. Activating this button will allow you to switch between a light or dark background for easier viewing.
Going to the center of the screen, you will first notice the battery symbol to indicate whether there is a low voltage condition or not.
Just to the right is the patient status symbol and will either be green, yellow, or red depending on the condition of the patient. Next is the door ajar button and will indicate any open door. Just below the Road Rescue logo is the climate control button. Pressing this button brings up the climate control screen.
The climate control has two different modes, automatic and manual. In automatic, the user chooses a desired module temperature and the system will automatically change between heat and cool and vary the fan speed in order to maintain this temperature.
The power button activates/deactivates the climate control system. As the system is tied to the OEM climate control, the system can only be enabled with the ignition on. The increase temp and decrease temp buttons are used to designate the set temperature when in automatic mode. The system will attempt to maintain this set temperature. This auto manual control button changes the system mode between automatic and manual. The manual climate control screen is very similar to the automatic screen. On the manual screen, however, the user chooses what mode to set the system to, heat, cool, or vent, and directly controls the fan speed through the increase fan and decrease fan buttons. The menu button returns the user to the switches screen. By pressing the switches screen on the bottom right, the second switches screen appears. As you can see, the center of the screen remains the same as the first switches screen. This screen mainly controls the lights and devices in the patient module. Starting at the top left is the switch that controls the dome lights. Next is the switch that can turn the cot lights on or off and can also switch them from high to low. Then comes the bench light switch, which can also be high or low, followed by the strip light switch, and then the attendant light switch. The oxygen valve starts out the switches on the right side, followed by the exhaust fan switch, which can be set at a high or low speed. The next switch can turn the light in the oxygen compartment on or off. The timer cutout switch is next, which can be used to cancel the 5-minute ignition timer. The ignition needs to be in the off position to activate it. Once you press it, the whole system will turn off. The next button is the dump enable switch. When it is lit, the dump function is enabled. If you open the rear street side door, it will dump the back end of the truck. It is a one-shot function. If you press the button again, it will disable the dump function. The only way to reset it is to open the rear street side door and close it again. If you are in park and the e-brake and module are on, once you open the rear street side door, the back end of the truck will lower. You can disable the dump function in two locations, with the button on the screen or this button located in the rear of the module. When it is disabled by either switch, it will not dump when you open the rear street side door. The only way to re-enable it is to close that street side rear door again. If you want to return to the first switches screen, simply push the next button, which is the switch page 1 button. If you would rather go to the third switches screen, then push the screens button on the lower right. On the third switches screen, the center of the page still remains the same, and it only has 3 additional switches. The first button is the interior lights button for the patient module. When you press it the first time, all of your module lights in the back will turn on. The bench lights will go to high, cot lights will go to high, the strip lights will turn on, and the attendant light will turn on. If you hit the switch again, any lights with a low functionality, such as your cot lights and bench lights, will go to low. If you hit it once more, all the lights will turn off. The backup alarm button can toggle the backup alarm button on or off. The usual procedure is like this. When you put the transmission in reverse, the backup alarm switches on automatically and the red light beside the switch turns on. To turn off the backup alarm, simply push the switch. The last button takes you back to the second switches page, or you can use the screen switch on the lower right to go to any desired screen. Now, we will explore the 2 panels of SPS One Touch physical switches. They provide redundant functionality for a lot of the buttons we have just discussed. The first button on the top left is the emergency master button. It initially turns on all of your warning lights in primary mode. Next is the warning light dimmer switch. It puts your warning lights into the low power mode. The white light cutout follows that switch and will disable the white lights when the emergency master is on. The siren/horn button changes your siren horn functionality as we discussed before.
The video button is next and will turn the UV700 camera screen on.
The last two buttons are the display bright and display dim buttons, which will let you brighten or dim the background on the display for easier viewing. The four buttons on the remaining panel let you control the right flood, left flood, and rear floodlights. You can also switch off the backup alarm. Now, we will move to the patient module and explore the UV700 and the two SPS-1 touch panels located there. The rear panel is very similar to the front panel and has all the functionality of the front screen except for the switches screen. It contains screens with switches to operate the patient module devices. These switch screens are also customizable to fit the end user's needs. The attendant uses the center touchscreen to set the patient status, which is then also displayed on the front panel located in the cab. Climate control is also accessible from the rear screen and is exactly like the front screen. The oxygen PSI is added to the lower center of the main switches screen. The two SPS-1 touch switches panels are used for different functions in the patient module. All the switches on the left side are for the module lights and are exactly as we discussed on the cab front panel. Remember, opening any door also turns on the dome lights. The two switches that are added to the right side are the suction and inverter switch. They are used to operate the suction and inverter when required. The remaining switches work just like the ones in the cab. The clock/timer screen displays either the current time or a countdown timer, depending on what the user has selected using the clock/timer switch. The countdown timer can be set to a range of times from 1 minute to 30 minutes. The top button on the left is used to start and stop the timer. The reset switch sets it back to 0. The first SPS-1 touch switch panel has 4 active switches. The remaining switches can be configured to the user's desires. As you can see, the first switch controls the suction. The next can turn all the lights on or off. Just below on the left is the oxygen switch, and next to it is the exhaust fan switch. The only switch that is active on the 4-switch panel is the HVAC cutout switch. This brings us to the end of our presentation on the UV700 display. Road Rescue would like to thank you for your attention and hopes this presentation helps you in your daily efforts towards saving lives.